Colonel Harrison slammed the report down. "This isn't a beauty salon, sweetheart. Civilians don't touch operator-grade weapons." 20 elite trainees froze. Sarah Mitchell didn't blink. Blonde ponytail, blank stare, silent. He smirked. "Pretty face won't save real soldiers." Laughter erupted, then died, instantly. When her collar slipped, a glimpse. Faded ink, military black. An insignia not seen in years. Private Chen stepped back, blood draining. "That tattoo, SEAL Team 9? Harrison scoffed, turning away, dismissed. But her voice cut through the silence, measured, sharp. "Permission to recalibrate the M110, sir." She stepped forward, calm as death. Chen's pulse spiked. That tone, that insignia, that stillness. No photo, no body, no name, but every ghost story starts somewhere. When she turned, every ghost story starts somewhere, and now, one stood in front of them. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look? Where are you watching from? Some might wonder if staying silent like Sarah shows strength or weakness. The choice between revealing your true self and maintaining your peace isn't always simple. Sarah Mitchell arrives at Fort Benning every morning at 0500 hours, an hour before the first soldiers begin their day. She parks her 10-year-old pickup truck in the same spot, carries the same thermos of black coffee, and enters the weapons maintenance facility with the same measured steps. To her colleagues, she's just Sarah from maintenance, the competent but unremarkable civilian contractor who keeps to herself and never joins them for drinks after work. Her apartment sits 3 miles from base, a modest one-bedroom with beige walls and minimal furniture. No photographs adorn the surfaces, no medals displayed in shadow boxes, no hints of a life beyond the simple routine she's maintained for 3 years. Her workstation reflects the same simplicity, tools arranged with mathematical precision, each weapon she touches receiving the kind of attention most reserved for newborn babies. Other maintenance staff joke that she treats every rifle like it might save the world, never knowing how many times her perfectly maintained weapons actually have. Sarah deflects their questions about her past with practiced ease, mentioning a general interest in firearms, some time at a gun range growing up, nothing that would raise eyebrows or invite further inquiry. She dresses in jeans and plain shirts, her blonde hair always pulled back in the same practical ponytail, her movements efficient, but never flashy. 8 years ago, the name Ghost whispered through the ranks of naval special warfare like a prayer and a curse combined. 322 confirmed kills across 17 countries, 47 high-value targets eliminated with surgical precision that defied physics and probability. The only woman to complete SEAL training without a single modified standard, matching and often exceeding her male counterparts in every metric. Her teammates in SEAL Team 9 spoke of her in hushed tones, describing someone who could thread a bullet through a wedding ring at 500 meters, or calculate wind drift in her head faster than most could with a computer. The Jakarta shot remains classified above top secret, but those who were there still dream about it. 2,100 meters through urban chaos, past 3 buildings, through a 4-inch gap between 2 vehicles, to strike a suicide bomber's detonator before he could eliminate an entire diplomatic convoy. The physics said, impossible. The spotters said, impossible. But Ghost didn't deal in impossibilities. She dealt in necessity, and that day, necessity demanded the impossible become reality. The medal ceremony happened in a room with no windows, attended by people whose names would never appear in any record, honoring an operator who officially didn't exist. But even Ghost can be haunted. The final mission in Afghanistan started like dozens before it, a high-value target in a compound outside Kandahar, satellite imagery showing minimal security, intelligence suggesting a quick extraction. Sarah's position on the ridge gave her perfect overwatch as her team moved through the valley below. She counted 14 heat signatures when there should have been 6, noticed vehicle tracks that seemed too fresh, felt that familiar tingle that warned of danger. By the time she keyed her radio, the ambush had already begun. Explosions tore through the night as hidden fighters emerged from tunnels nobody knew existed. Half of SEAL Team 9 died in that valley, while Sarah's rifle sang its deadly song, each shot finding its mark but never enough, never fast enough. She ran out of ammunition trying to save them, watching through her scope as brothers she'd served with for 6 years fell one by one. The extraction helicopter found her still in position, rifle empty, counting bodies and memorizing faces. The investigation cleared her completely. commendations for valor under fire, confirmation that no sniper could have done more. But Sarah knew better. She knew about the 14 heat signatures, about the fresh tracks, about the 2 seconds of hesitation that might have made the difference. The nightmare started immediately, faces of the dead visiting her every time she closed her eyes. Their voices asked why she missed the signs, why the ghosts had failed when they needed her most. Sleep became an enemy worse than any Taliban fighter. Rest impossible without pharmaceutical intervention that dulled her edge and made her hands shake. The Navy psychiatrist tried everything, therapy and medication and time. But some wounds cut too deep for healing. Sarah submitted her discharge papers 6 months after Afghanistan, requesting immediate separation and classification of all service records. The ghost died with her team in that valley, and Sarah Mitchell was all that remained. She found peace in simplicity, in the routine maintenance of weapons that would keep other soldiers safe. Every rifle she cleaned, every scope she calibrated, every trigger mechanism she adjusted became a small act of penance. 100 push-ups every morning at 0500, not for fitness, but for remembrance. 1 for each confirmed kill that didn't save her brothers when it mattered most. The work at Fort Benning offered anonymity and purpose, allowing her to serve without the weight of command or the burden of being a legend. Nobody needed to know that the quiet woman in maintenance had once been death incarnate behind a scope. Colonel James Harrison arrived at Fort Benning with a reputation for cleaning house and maintaining strict military standards. His 2 tours in Iraq, mostly spent in the Green Zone conducting administrative duties, somehow translated in his mind to combat expertise that gave him the right to judge everyone else's worthiness. He targeted Sarah immediately, the only female civilian contractor in weapons maintenance, standing out like a sore thumb in his vision of military perfection. Daily inspections of her work became his routine, always finding issues that existed only in his imagination, commenting on diversity hires and participation trophies while other staff watched in uncomfortable silence. The harassment escalated with each passing week, Harrison's comments growing bolder as he sensed no pushback from his target. He scheduled her for weekend shifts without compensation, required daily reports that no other contractor submitted, and made sure she knew her contract renewal hung by a thread he controlled. Sarah absorbed each slight with the same quiet acceptance, her work never faltering despite the increased scrutiny. Other maintenance staff whispered their sympathy but kept their distance, knowing Harrison's connections reached high enough to end careers with a single phone call. The colonel seemed to take her silence as weakness, never recognizing the self-control required to remain calm under his constant barrage. Commander Marcus Rodriguez of SEAL Team 3 arrived for a joint training exercise, bringing with him the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen real combat across 4 continents. Harrison immediately latched onto the visiting officer, regaling him with stories of his own military prowess while touring him through the facilities. Rodriguez listened with professional courtesy, his trained eyes taking in details Harrison missed entirely. When they reached the maintenance area, he noticed Sarah's workstation immediately, the arrangement of tools speaking a language only those who'd lived by their weapons would understand. The way she held a rifle while cleaning it, the unconscious check of chamber and safety, the perfect form that came from muscle memory earned in life or death situations. Harrison's voice carried across the workspace as he criticized Sarah's latest report, making sure Rodriguez witnessed his leadership style. The maintenance supervisor tried to intervene, explaining that Sarah's work exceeded every metric, but Harrison cut him off with a wave. "Real warriors understand weapons differently than civilians playing soldier," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Rodriguez watched Sarah's reaction, or rather her lack of one, noting how her breathing remained steady even as Harrison's insults grew more personal. When the colonel suggested she take up a more appropriate career in cosmetology, Rodriguez caught the micro-accession that flashed across her face, there and gone in an instant. The breaking point arrived during a mandatory all-hands meeting, where Harrison announced the non-renewal of several contracts due to substandard performance. He saved Sarah for last, projecting her personnel file on the screen for everyone to see. No military experience, no formal training beyond a basic firearms course, no qualifications that justified her position maintaining weapons for America's finest warriors. "This is what happens when we lower standards for political correctness," he declared, pointing at her file like evidence in a court-martial. Sarah sat in the 3rd row, surrounded by colleagues who knew her work spoke louder than any resume, watching Harrison dismantle 3 years of quiet service in front of 200 people. Rodriguez observed from the back of the room, his attention split between Harrison's performance and Sarah's response. Her hands rested on her knees, completely still except for one moment when they clenched and released, a gesture so quick most would miss it. But Rodriguez had seen that exact movement before, in operators fighting to maintain control, when every instinct screamed for action. Harrison continued his presentation, explaining how the base would implement new standards that would ensure only qualified personnel touched their weapons. The phrase he used, "trust the process," seemed to trigger something in Sarah. Her breathing changed, becoming the measured, controlled rhythm Rodriguez recognized from countless operations. The memory hit Sarah like a physical blow, transporting her back to that ridge in Afghanistan. Her spotter, Lieutenant Morrison, had used those exact words during their final mission briefing. "Trust the process, Ghost," he'd said with that crooked smile that made everyone believe everything would work out. Morrison died first in the ambush, RPG turning his position into smoke and memory, while Sarah's scope tracked targets through tears she couldn't afford to acknowledge. The weight of dog tags in her pocket brought her back to the present. 5 sets she carried every day, 5 names she whispered every morning during those 100 push-ups. Harrison's voice faded into background noise as more memories surfaced, unbidden. The young private who'd asked for shooting lessons between missions, eager to earn a sniper tab like his hero. The communications specialist who kept her supplied with terrible coffee and worse jokes during 40-hour Overwatch positions. The medic who'd patched her up after a lucky ricochet, joking that ghosts weren't supposed to bleed, all gone in 23 minutes of sustained combat that played on repeat behind her eyes. Sarah forced herself to focus on Harrison's presentation, on the present rather than the past, but her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. Rodriguez stepped forward as Harrison concluded his remarks about maintaining excellence through proper personnel selection. "Colonel, may I see that weapon?" he asked, pointing to a rifle Sarah had just finished maintaining. Harrison handed it over with a flourish, expecting the SEAL commander to find the flaws he'd been documenting. Rodriguez examined the weapon with expert hands, checking balance, action, and sight alignment with movements that spoke of decades of experience. His expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching awe as he recognized the level of precision in the maintenance work. "This is master-level work," Rodriguez announced, his voice cutting through the room's murmur. "I've only seen 3 people achieve this level of precision in my entire career." Harrison scoffed, explaining that Sarah was just a civilian contractor with no real understanding of combat requirements. Rodriguez turned to study Sarah directly, his eyes narrowing as pieces of a puzzle clicked into place. "That breathing technique," he said quietly, moving closer to where she Coronado? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for the first time since Harrison began his campaign, Sarah's mask slipped. The micro-accession lasted less than a second, but Rodriguez caught it, recognition flooding his features. "The Jakarta shot," he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper that somehow carried throughout the silent room. 2,100 meters through urban terrain to save a diplomatic convoy. Only one person ever made that shot. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her collar, a defensive gesture that shifted her shirt just enough to reveal what she'd kept hidden for 3 years. The partial tattoo became visible, a SEAL trident interwoven with spectral imagery and the numbers that meant everything to those who understood them. Rodriguez went rigid, his body snapping to attention as if greeting a senior officer. "My God," he breathed, "you're the Ghost!" The room exploded in whispers as the legend collided with reality. Young SEAL trainees who'd grown up hearing stories of the Ghost looked at Sarah with expressions ranging from disbelief to reverence. "The Ghost is real," one whispered. "And she's been here all along?" Harrison's face drained of color as he processed Rodriguez's words, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "That's impossible," he finally managed. "The Ghost was—" Sarah spoke for the first time since the meeting began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded life and death. "A man? 7 feet tall? Dead?" "Stories grow in the telling, Colonel." Rodriguez turned to address the room, his voice carrying the weight of verified truth. "You've been insulting the most decorated sniper in SEAL history. 322 confirmed kills across 17 countries, 47 high-value targets eliminated, presidential commendations that will remain classified for 50 years. She has more confirmed kills than your entire battalion combined, Colonel Harrison." The commander's words painted a picture of service that transcended normal military achievement. each detail adding another layer to the legend sitting quietly in their midst. Sarah finally looked Harrison directly in the eye, her gaze carrying the weight of every life she'd taken and failed to save. "I've maintained every weapon on this base to the standard that kept me alive through 73 operations," she said, each word measured and precise. "Your amateur has been ensuring your soldiers' weapons won't fail them like mine failed my team." The confession hung in the air, vulnerability and strength wrapped in the same breath. Harrison stammered, trying to form words that wouldn't come, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling before 200 witnesses. "The records say what I wanted them to say," Sarah continued, standing now with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned to move in hostile territory. "I chose this life, Colonel. I chose to serve without recognition because the alternative was to stop serving entirely. And these soldiers, your soldiers, deserve equipment maintained by someone who understands that a misaligned scope or a dirty chamber isn't just a maintenance issue, it's the difference between coming home and a folded flag." Her words carried no anger, just the terrible clarity of hard-won wisdom. Harrison's desperation to salvage his authority produced one last challenge. "Prove it," he demanded, voice cracking slightly. "Anyone can claim to be someone they're not." Sarah's response surprised everyone who'd known her as the quiet gunsmith. A slight smile touched her lips, the first anyone had seen in 3 years of working alongside her. Rodriguez tried to intervene, warning the colonel against pushing further, but Sarah raised a hand. "No, it's fine," she said. "The range. Your best shooter against the ghost. Let's make it interesting." The crowd moved like a tide toward the outdoor range, word spreading through the base faster than any official communication. Master Sergeant Thompson, the base's designated marksman instructor and competition champion, accepted the challenge with professional dignity. He understood he was about to shoot against a legend, but his pride demanded he give his best effort. Sarah modified the standard qualification course while they watched, adding moving targets, variable wind flags, and distance markers that made even experienced shooters whistle in appreciation. She picked up one of the rifles she'd maintained that morning, checking it once with movements so automatic they seemed like breathing. Thompson shot first, demonstrating why he held the base record for qualification scores. 47 out of 50 targets fell to his precise shooting, groupings that would qualify for any sniper school in the world. The crowd applauded respectfully as he stepped back, satisfied with his performance under pressure. Sarah stepped to the line without ceremony, adjusting the rifle's sling with minute movements that spoke of countless hours in similar positions. He didn't even raise the scope for the first 10 shots, firing from the hip at close-range targets with a speed that seemed reckless until every target showed perfect center hits. The middle-distance targets required more traditional shooting positions, but Sarah moved through them like a dance, each shot flowing into the next without wasted motion. The crowd fell silent as she reached the long-range portion, targets that challenged even with perfect conditions. She made micro-adjustments for wind without checking the flags, reading air currents through instincts honed in places where missing meant death. The 40th target fell, then the 45th, each shot grouped so tightly they could be covered with a quarter. For her final 10 shots, Sarah did something that made even Rodriguez catch his breath. She called for modifications that shouldn't have been possible. Coins at 500 meters, playing cards at 300, and for the final shot, someone's wedding ring hung on a thread at 300 meters. The ring swayed in the breeze, a target smaller than a bullet, with movement that made prediction nearly impossible. Sarah settled into her shooting position with the stillness of carved stone, her breathing so controlled she seemed to stop existing between heartbeats. The rifle spoke once, and the ring spun on its thread, a perfect hole through its center that defied physics and probability equally. 50 out of 50 targets, evaluation marked as supernatural precision by the range computer that had never seen such consistency. The silence that followed felt like a prayer, broken finally by a young female trainee who approached with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, voice trembling with emotion, "could you teach us? Would you show us how to be like you?" Sarah saw herself in those eager eyes, remembered her own hunger to prove herself in a world that said she didn't belong. The request touched something she'd kept buried beneath 3 years of anonymity and 8 years of guilt. "The real lesson isn't about shooting," Sarah replied, her voice carrying to the assembled crowd. "It's about service without recognition, about doing what needs to be done because it needs doing, not because someone will pin a medal on your chest." She looked at the young woman, then at the other trainees, gathering courage to step forward. "I'll teach anyone who understands that true strength speaks in actions, not words, that humility and competence aren't opposites, but companions. Her agreement came with conditions that focused on character over capability. Rodriguez approached with an offer that once would have been everything she wanted. The teams need you, Ghost. We have operations where your skills could save lives, make differences that matter. Sarah's refusal came gently but firmly. The Ghost died with her team in Afghanistan, Commander. What you need is instructors who can prepare the next generation, not legends who remind them of mortality. I'll train your shooters, but I won't carry a rifle in anger again. Some ghosts are better left buried. Rodriguez nodded, understanding written in every line of his face. To Harrison, who stood forgotten at the edge of the crowd, Sarah offered neither forgiveness nor condemnation. You have good soldiers here, Colonel. They deserve leadership that sees their potential rather than their limitations, leaders who build rather than tear down. Consider this demonstration a final maintenance report. Everything on this base works exactly as it should. Whether that includes you is your decision. She turned away before he could respond, missing the moment when his resignation appeared on the base commander's desk an hour later. Sarah returned to work the next morning as if nothing had changed, arriving at 0500 to find a small package on her workstation. Inside, Rodriguez had left a shadow box containing medals and commendations that officially didn't exist. Achievements measured in lives saved rather than glory earned. The note attached read simply, "For when you're ready to remember the good with the bad." Sarah hung it in the maintenance room without fanfare, another tool among many, its significance known only to those who recognized the symbols of sacrifice. Her training sessions became legendary, without trying to be, focused on fundamentals that went beyond marksmanship. She taught breathing techniques that calmed racing hearts, visualization that turned pressure into precision, and most importantly, the mental discipline that separated technicians from artists. Students called her ma'am with reverence. She deflected with practiced ease. "Just Sarah," she corrected each time, because titles belonged to the person she used to be, not the teacher she'd become. The young female trainee from that first day became her most dedicated student, absorbing lessons that went far beyond trigger pull and wind calls. Harrison's replacement arrived within a month, a commander who treated every member of the base with professional respect. He made a point of visiting the maintenance facility on his first day, spending an hour discussing equipment needs with the staff Harrison had dismissed. Sarah noticed but didn't acknowledge the change, focusing instead on her work and the steady stream of soldiers seeking guidance. The new dynamic shifted the entire base's culture. Competence valued over connections, results over rhetoric. 6 months after the revelation, Sarah stood alone at the range as dawn painted the horizon in shades of memory. She set up a shot that matched Jakarta exactly, 2,100 meters, to a target that existed more in her mind than reality. The calculations came automatically: wind speed and bullet drop, elevation and drift, all the variables that made long-range shooting an art form. But this shot wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about remembering why she'd taken all the others. The rifle settled into her shoulder like an old friend, familiar despite the years of separation. Sarah's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, each exhale releasing a name into the morning air. Morrison, who'd trusted the process until the very end. Williams, who'd saved her life twice before she couldn't save his. Martinez, Chen, and Roberts, brothers in arms who'd followed her spotting calls into that valley, believing Ghost would keep them safe. The trigger broke clean at the natural pause between breaths, the bullet flying true across impossible distance to strike dead center. She packed the rifle with the same methodical care she brought to every task, each movement a small ritual of respect. The sun climbed higher, casting her shadow long across the range, where she'd proven what never needed proving. As she walked back toward the maintenance facility, Sarah whispered the words that had become her morning prayer, 5 names that would never appear on any official record, but lived in every weapon she touched. The ghosts of Afghanistan would always haunt her, but they no longer held her prisoner. True warriors don't seek war, her thoughts settled into a truth learned through terrible cost. They seek peace, understanding that violence is sometimes necessary, but never glorious. When that peace faces threats, real warriors don't announce their presence with boasts or bravado. They simply do what must be done, with competence and humility, then fade back into the shadows where legends live. Sarah Mitchell understood this better than most, having been both legend and liability, hero and haunted. The ghost who'd finally found peace in serving without glory. What would you do if someone questioned your expertise in your own field? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in proving our worth to critics, but in continuing our work regardless of recognition. Sarah's story reminds us that true expertise speaks through actions, not arguments, and that the most powerful response to disrespect might be the quiet dignity of competence. The maintenance facility hummed with its usual morning activity as Sarah began her day's work. Young soldiers stopped by more frequently now, some seeking technical advice, others simply wanting to be near someone who'd transformed from myth to mentor. She treated each with the same patient attention, whether they asked about trigger control or how to handle the pressure of expectation. Her answers always focused on fundamentals, on the basics that separated good shooters from great ones, but her lessons carried deeper wisdom about service and sacrifice. One morning, the female trainee Sarah had first agreed to teach brought coffee and a question that went beyond marksmanship. "How do you carry it?" she asked, "the weight of what you've done and what you couldn't do?" Sarah's hands never paused in their work, but her voice carried the weight of hard-won understanding. "You carry it by choosing how it shapes you," she replied. "Every life taken, every life lost, becomes part of who you are. The question is whether you let it make you bitter or better. I chose to let my ghosts guide me toward service instead of away from it." The shadow box Rodriguez had left became a teaching tool without Sarah intending it. Young soldiers studied the medals and ribbons, recognizing some, puzzled by others, that existed in classification levels they'd never reach. One asked about a particular commendation, its meaning lost in military symbolism. "That's a reminder," Sarah explained, "that honor doesn't need announcement." Every medal in that box represents a moment when doing the right thing mattered more than who got credit. The real reward was coming home when others didn't, carrying their memory forward in how we serve. Her influence spread beyond the shooting range in ways she never anticipated. Soldiers began maintaining their weapons with newfound respect, understanding that each rifle represented trust between warriors. The culture of the base shifted, subtly but significantly, competence valued over credentials, quiet professionalism replacing empty boasts. Other civilian contractors found themselves treated with increased respect. Harrison's toxic leadership style rejected in favor of recognition that expertise came in many forms. Sarah noticed but didn't comment, focused on her work and the steady stream of students seeking knowledge. 3 years later, when retirement finally beckoned, Sarah's departure was marked not by ceremony, but by absence. She left the way she'd arrived, quietly and without fanfare, her workstation cleaned and organized for whoever would follow. The shadow box remained in the maintenance facility, a reminder and inspiration for future generations who would hear the story of the ghost who chose service over glory. Young soldiers would ask about the woman who'd maintained their weapons with supernatural precision, and older ones would share the legend with appropriate reverence. But legends never truly die, they simply evolve. Somewhere in a small town, far from any military base, a shooting instructor named Sarah teaches precision to hunters and sport shooters with the same patient dedication she'd brought to training warriors. She never mentions her past unless directly relevant, never trades on former glory for present respect. Her students know her as an exceptional teacher, with an uncanny ability to diagnose and correct shooting problems. Nothing more. The ghosts still whisper in quiet moments, 5 names carried forever, but they no longer define her present. On certain mornings, when mist clings to the local range like memory, Sarah sets up impossible shots that no student witnesses. The rifle speaks its ancient language of physics and precision, bullets flying true across distances that challenge belief. She takes these shots not to maintain skills that will never again be used in anger, but to honor promises made to the dead. Each perfect impact represents a life that continues to matter, a soul whose sacrifice shapes every lesson she teaches. The ghost lives on, not as a warrior but as a teacher, proving that true strength lies in lifting others to heights they never thought possible. Do you believe true strength speaks louder than words? Share your thoughts below. Sarah Mitchell's journey from legendary operator to humble instructor reminds us that the greatest warriors often fight their most important battles in silence, measuring victory not in accolades but in the lives they touch and the service they render without recognition. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is step back from the spotlight and use our expertise to illuminate the path for others. Her story echoes through Fort Benning and beyond, a reminder that heroes walk among us in unexpected forms. The quiet maintenance worker, the patient instructor, the colleague who never speaks of their past. Each might carry histories of extraordinary service, masked by ordinary presence. Sarah chose anonymity over acclaim. teaching over commanding, service over self. In doing so, she embodied the highest ideals of warrior culture, proving that true strength needs no announcement, only application. The morning sun casts long shadows across empty ranges and busy maintenance facilities, across training grounds where future warriors learn their craft, and quiet workshops where expertise meets humility. Somewhere, Sarah Mitchell continues her work, one weapon, one student, one act of service at a time. The ghost may have died in Afghanistan, but what rose from that tragedy was something more powerful than any legend. A teacher who understood that the greatest victory lies not in defeating enemies but in preparing others to protect what matters most. Her shadow stretches long across the landscape of military culture, a reminder that true warriors serve not for glory but for those who cannot serve themselves. And when that service is complete, they fade back into the shadows, where legends live, content in the knowledge that their duty continues through every life they've touched.